Didn't want to go to that dinner. That's the thing I keep coming back to. I almost didn't go. My daughter had called me that Tuesday morning, excited in the way she gets when she's trying to convince me of something before I have a chance to say no. Dad, just come. It's one dinner. Joel made reservations at Carmine's. You'll love it. I hadn't loved anything about Joel since the day she introduced him to me 14 months ago. But I didn't say that. I said I'd think about it. She knew that meant yes. So I put on my good shirt, the navy one my late wife bought me for our anniversary 7 years ago. And I drove 40 minutes up Route 9 to Glenbrook, and I sat across from my son-in-law at a white tablecloth restaurant while he ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than my first car payment. His name was Joel Paris. He was 41 years old. My daughter Lily was 33. She'd met him at a conference in Denver, and 6 months later he'd proposed on a rooftop in Nashville. She showed me the ring over FaceTime. It was enormous. I remember thinking that a man who buys a ring that size that fast is trying to prove something to somebody. But she was happy. God, she was happy. And she was the only thing I had left that mattered. So I kept my mouth shut and I walked her down the aisle. And I shook Joel's hand at the altar. And I meant it when I said welcome to the family. That was 4 months before the dinner at Carmine's. The restaurant was the kind of place where they refold your napkin when you go to the restroom. Dark wood, low lighting, a piano player in the corner doing a version of something I recognized but couldn't name. Joel had ordered the lamb. He was talking about the new investment property he was looking at up in Asheville, a vacation rental, 4,300 square feet, mountain views. He talked with his hands. He always talked with his hands. Lily was glowing. She had her hair up the way she used to when she was a kid, loose strands falling around her face, and she kept touching Joel's arm when he made a point, laughing at the right moments. I watched her and felt the particular ache of a man who knows his daughter has built a world that doesn't need him in it anymore. I was glad for her. I was also lonely in a way I couldn't explain out loud. Joel excused himself around 8:15. His phone had buzzed twice and he looked at it and said, "Forgive me, give me 2 minutes." And he was gone. The piano player shifted into something slower. I picked up my water glass. And that's when the old man appeared. I didn't see him approach. He was simply there, beside my chair, bent slightly at the shoulder, maybe 75, maybe 80. He was wearing a brown sport coat, and he had the kind of face that had seen a great deal and stopped being surprised by most of it, a long time ago. His eyes were steady and very serious. He pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. He didn't ask permission. He didn't introduce himself. He just leaned down close enough that I could smell his aftershave, something cedar and soap, something old-fashioned, and he said very quietly, "Your son-in-law, the man who just walked outside. You need to look into where he was before Denver." I stared at him. He straightened up. "I'm sorry to do this here. I am truly sorry. But your girl needs to know what he is." He turned and walked back toward the bar without a second glance. Lily was looking at her phone and hadn't noticed any of it. I held the paper under the table and unfolded it with one hand. There was a name written on it, and below the name a city, Cincinnati, Ohio, and below that Mara Dunning, Probate Court, Case No. When 2019 PR 1142. Joel came back to the table smiling, apologizing, saying the Asheville deal might be moving faster than expected. I folded the paper into my breast pocket. I picked up my fork. I ate the rest of my meal and I made conversation, and I did not look at him the same way again. I didn't sleep at night. I'm a retired postal supervisor. I spent 31 years making sure things went where they were supposed to go, which means I understand systems and I understand how to follow a paper trail. I also know that sometimes a stranger in a restaurant with a serious face is confused or crazy or has an axe to grind. I wanted to believe that. I lay in bed at 11:30 and told myself I was being a paranoid old man. At 12:15, I got up and opened my laptop. Mara Dunning, Cincinnati, Ohio. Probate Court. Case number 2019 PR 1142. It took me 40 minutes to find her obituary. She had died in March of 2019. She was 38 years old. The cause was listed as sudden cardiac event. She was described as a loving daughter, a talented landscape architect, a woman who had recently relocated to Cincinnati from Nashville. She had been married. The obituary did not name the husband. I sat in the kitchen for a while with the lights off. The house made the sounds. Houses make a night. The refrigerator cycling. A branch against the window. The particular silence of a place where only one person lives. I thought about Lily asleep 40 minutes up the road, in the house she and Joel had bought last fall. A 4-bedroom colonial in Glenbrook, good school district. Finished basement. He put in the down payment himself. He'd insisted. I went back to the laptop. It took me 3 days of searching public records, court filings, property databases, before I found what I was looking for. Joel Parrish had been born Joel Parrish in Louisville, Kentucky. He dropped the age somewhere around 2015. He had been married once before, in Nashville, to a woman named Mara Dunning. They'd been married for 14 months, almost exactly the same length of time he'd been with my daughter, before Mara died. In the months following her death, according to probate court records, Joel had filed claims against her estate. Mara had owned a small investment property in East Nashville that she'd inherited from her mother, valued at roughly $290,000. Joel had contested the will. He had settled eventually for $180,000 in a mediated agreement with Mara's family. And then he had moved to Denver, where he met my daughter, who had, I knew because she told me with such pride, recently come into her own inheritance from her mother's life insurance policy and the sale of her mother's house, $340,000, sitting in an account she'd set up with Joel as joint beneficiary because they were married, and that's what you do when you're married and you trust someone completely. I closed the laptop. My hands weren't shaking. They probably should have been. Instead, there was a coldness in me. Very quiet. The kind that comes when something you were afraid was true turns out to be true. Turns out to be. I picked up my phone. Then I put it back down. I needed to do this right. I needed proof that was solid, not circumstantial. I needed someone who knew the law. And I needed to not panic my daughter before I understood the full shape of what I was dealing with. I called my brother-in-law the next morning. He's been a real estate attorney in Hartford for 22 years. And beyond that, he is the most methodical human being I've ever known. I told him everything. He was quiet for a long time. Okay, he said, don't call Lily yet. Let me make some calls. He phoned me back at 4 in the afternoon. His voice was careful in a way that meant what he'd found was worse than what he'd expected. The Dunning estate settlement is a matter of public record, he said. Joel, or Parrish, whatever he's calling himself, walked away with $180,000 from Mara's property. What I also found through a contact at the probate court is that there was a life insurance payout that went directly to Joel as the named beneficiary. Mara had updated her policy 8 months before she died. He was added as primary beneficiary at that update. I asked him how much. $240,000. There it was. $420,000, all told. Out of a marriage that lasted 14 months. Out of a woman who was 38 years old and then was dead. We don't know that he did anything, my brother-in-law said carefully. The medical examiner ruled it a cardiac event. There's no open investigation. But what? But you should get Lily away from him. Now. Before he does anything with that account and before this gets any more complicated. That evening I drove to Glenbrook. I didn't call ahead. I used the spare key Lily had given me when they moved in, for emergencies. She laughed when she handed it to me. In case you ever need to rescue me, Dad. And neither of us had known then how true that might someday be. Joel's car was gone. She was alone, eating takeout Thai on the couch with her shoes off, watching something on her tablet. She looked up and smiled. Dad, what are you? I need you to listen to me, I said, and I need you to hear me all the way through before you say anything. She heard me all the way through. I've tried to remember since, exactly how her face moved through those 30 minutes. They were phases. The first was patient. She thought I was overreacting. The protective father who never really trusted her husband. The second was uncomfortable. She started to squirm a little, the way you do when someone says something you don't want to have to take seriously. The third phase is the one I'll never forget. It came when I showed her the probate records on my phone, the life insurance figure, the dates. It was the phase where her face simply went still. He told me, she said slowly, that his first wife had a heart condition. He told me at the beginning. He said it was sudden and he didn't like to talk about it. Did he tell you her name? She thought. He said her name was Mari, with an I. Close enough to be deniable, different enough to clear a background search. She was quiet for a long time. Outside, a car went by. The Thai food sat forgotten on the coffee table. Dad, she finally said, what if you're wrong? I hope I am, I said. I genuinely hope I am. But your mother's money is in a joint account with his name on it, and a woman died, and he has done this before. I need you to come stay with me, just for now, just while we sort this out. She looked around the room. The house she'd been so proud of, the throw pillows she picked out, the photos on the wall, the life she'd been building. He'll be home by 10, she said. Then we have 2 hours. We packed one bag each. I'm not sure she believed me, fully, not yet. I think she was moving on instinct, on the part of herself that had felt something without being able to name it, the way women sometimes know things before they can prove them. She moved quietly and quickly, and she didn't cry until we were in my car on Route 9. And then she cried in that particular way that means you've been holding something for a long time. I let her cry. I kept driving. She stayed with me for 3 weeks. During that time, my brother-in-law connected her with a family law attorney who specialized in financial fraud. They moved quietly to freeze her individual accounts and document the joint account activity. Joel had already transferred $40,000 out of the joint account. 3 days after our dinner at Carmine's, 2 days before I showed up at the house. He'd known something was coming, or maybe he always had an exit number in mind. I'll never know which. What I know is what happened next. Lily's attorney, working with the probate contact in Cincinnati, filed a civil fraud complaint. Joel's prior history, the name change, the suspicious timeline, the life insurance payout was enough to trigger a review. The Louisville field office of the FBI opened an inquiry. I learned later that Mara Dunning's sister had spent 2 years trying to get someone to look at her death more carefully and had been told repeatedly there was nothing actionable. There was something actionable now. Joel was arrested on fraud and wire fraud charges 11 weeks after that dinner at Carmine's. The cardiac event that killed Mara Dunning was re-examined. The toxicology work that hadn't been done at the time, because no one had thought to look, was reconstructed through tissue samples that the medical examiner had retained. I don't know all the details. I'm not sure I want to. What I know is that the prosecutor told Lily's attorney that the case was solid and that what happened to Mara was not natural. He's awaiting trial as I write this. Lily got most of her money back. The house in Glenbrook is being sold, and she's renting a place in the same town where I live, about 6 minutes from my front door. I went back to Carmine's once about 2 months after that night. I don't know exactly why. Maybe I needed to see the place without the weight of what I hadn't known yet. I sat at the same table. The piano player was there. Different song, same slow timing. I asked our server if she knew an older gentleman. Regular maybe. Brown sport coat, around 75 or 80. She thought about it and shook her head. I described him more precisely. The steady eyes, the cedar and soap aftershave, the way he moved like a man who'd made a decision and didn't second guess it. She said she thought I might be describing a man who used to come in on weeknights, always sat at the bar, used to live somewhere up toward Litchfield. She thought his name might have been something like Hadley. She wasn't sure. She said she hadn't seen him in a while. I don't know who he was. I don't know how he knew what he knew. I don't know if he'd encountered Joel before, or if he'd simply recognized something in the way a man excuses himself from a dinner table and decided to act on it. I've thought about it more times than I can count. What I know is that he saw something I hadn't let myself see yet. And instead of deciding it wasn't his problem, instead of finishing his drink and going home and leaving a stranger's daughter to whatever was coming, he got up. He walked across a restaurant. He pressed a folded piece of paper into an old man's hand and said, I'm sorry to do this here. Lily is doing well. She started seeing a therapist and she runs now. Something she never did before. 4 miles every morning before work. She calls me most nights. Sometimes we don't talk about anything important. Sometimes that's the best kind of conversation there is. And sometimes, when she calls, I'm sitting on our front porch in the dark listening to the neighborhood settle down for the night. And I think about a stranger in a brown sport coat who could have stayed in his seat. I'm grateful every single day that he didn't. I still think about that moment at the restaurant. Not the dramatic part, not Joel's arrest or the court filings or any of it. I think about the 30 seconds when I was sitting at that table with a folded piece of paper in my hand and a choice in front of me. I could have put it in my pocket and left it there. A lot of people would have. A lot of people do. What I've come to understand, sitting with all of this for nearly a year now, is that every outcome in this story traces back to decisions. Small ones, Ones that didn't feel monumental at the time. Joel made a decision years ago to become the kind of man who looks at a grieving widow's face and sees a transaction. That decision didn't announce itself. It accumulated, quietly, until it was just who he was. And Mara paid for it. And my daughter almost did too. But here's the other side of that. Every good thing that came out of this also traces back to decisions. The old man in the brown sport coat decided it was his business, even when it wasn't. My brother-in-law picked up the phone instead of telling me to let it go. Lily, when I showed her those records and her face went still, made the hardest decision of all. She chose truth over comfort, even when comfort was right there on that couch with her shoes off and her Thai food getting cold. I used to think courage was something dramatic, something you felt in a burning building or a car accident. I don't think that anymore. The courage in this story was quiet. It was a man getting up from a bar stool to walk across a restaurant. It was me staying up until midnight with a laptop instead of convincing myself it was none of my business. It was Lily standing up and walking out the door of a house she'd loved. And the intelligence, the clear-eyed, slow it down, follow the paper trail kind of intelligence, that mattered just as much as the courage did. Feelings are important. That sick concrete feeling in your stomach is important. But feelings need something to work with. I needed the court records. I needed the dates. I needed to understand the full shape of what Joel had done before I could ask my daughter to blow up her life based on my word alone. Being smart about it wasn't cold. It was the most loving thing I knew how to do. And the decency of it, the simple human decency of deciding that a stranger's daughter is worth getting up for. That's what I come back to, most. None of this happens without that old man. He didn't know me. He owed me nothing. He was probably tired. He probably knew it was going to be awkward and strange and that I might look at him like he was out of his mind. He did it anyway. Lily is 6 minutes from my front door now. She runs 4 miles every morning and she calls me most nights. Last week she called just to tell me she'd found a really good taco place near her apartment and did I want to come Saturday. I said yes before she finished the sentence. I think about who we might have been to each other in 5 years if none of this had come out. If I'd stayed in my lane and kept my mouth shut and convinced myself it wasn't my place. I think about what Joel was planning, and I think about a man I never properly met, whose name I'm not even sure of, who looked across the room and decided that what he saw was his problem to do something about. That's the only lesson I have, not a complicated one. When you see something and you know something and you have the chance to act, the cost of staying quiet is almost always higher than you think.